conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, February 26, 2025. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Chris Geidner, proprietor of the Law Dork newsletter on SubStack. On the legal front, being waged against apparently headless DOGE. Meanwhile, Republican House passes a budget resolution to cut Medicaid and SNAP to offset some of those cuts, tax cuts for the rich. Meanwhile, U.S.-Ukraine framework for minerals for defense already seems to be falling apart. And no one knows who's in charge of DOGE or why Elon Musk is attending Trump's first cabinet meeting. But 21 of the top technical experts at DOGE, the ones that were already part of the government, just quit. Meanwhile, it is 16 days into the government shutdown, and House Republicans have decided to cancel all of their town halls. First Amendment, free speech. Meanwhile, Trump has a plan to sell green cards in an attempt to increase wealth inequality in the U.S. The American Federation of Teachers sues the Department of Education for civil rights rollbacks. And EPA head Lee Zeldin is looking to reverse the landmark 2009 endangerment finding that climate change is real and bad for the planet. International Longshoremen Association vote in favor of a new contract. This after negotiations following its October strike. And remember those Oregon Nurses Association folks we spoke to now, I guess it was a month ago? Well, they just ratified a new contract after their 46-day successful strike. Bernie Sanders files a resolution of disapproval to block Trump's arms sales to Israel. All this and way, way too much more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us. Emma Vigeland out today. She sent me pictures. Did you see the video? Oh, I forgot about this. Folks, imagine a vent like in your bathroom, like one with the squares in it. Now imagine buckets of water pouring down from it into your bathroom.
Oh, crap.
Yep.
No.
Yep. Yep. So there we go.
Is that a metaphor or?
I mean, I'm not sure for what, but it's
country?
definitely, yeah, exactly. We got a lot to get to today. Last night at about, I think it was about 8 p.m.-ish, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives voted, the Republicans voted unanimously except for Massey. It was 217 to 212, if I remember correctly, on the passage of a budget resolution. And let me just walk you through very briefly what a budget resolution is, A, and B, why you should not confuse it with the government shutdown. The budget resolution essentially is a broad outline of how much money they want to cut from Americans and our government, and how much they want to cut in taxes, primarily for wealthy people. And that's basically it. Incidentally, I know how much Donald Trump was the anti-war candidate, and finally, America first. We're not going to get involved in things. This budget calls for a meager $10 billion additional each year for defense spending. I guarantee you when it hits the Senate, it goes up. But there is no cut associated with this. This budget resolution is not anywhere close to what the final thing will be. It's the easiest part of the process for the Republicans, though there is some surprise they were able to do this. But I think I said yesterday, they just want to move the chains, as it were, and that's it. They just want to move downfield, but they really have no plan to go anywhere after their own 30 or 40 yard line. The Senate still has their two-bill plan. Now what happens is, in the House, they have broad strokes. So they haven't said cut $800 billion from Medicaid quite yet. They have just tasked the Energy and Commerce Committee to make $880 billion in cuts. And there's no way for them to do that without making massive, massive cuts to Medicaid. Remember, 70 million Americans rely on Medicaid for health insurance, including almost 2/3 of the people living in nursing homes. And nearly 40% of babies born in this country. They also have instructed the Agriculture Committee to find $230 billion in cuts. There is no way they can find those cuts without deep, deep cuts to the SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Food stamps. Those are the two big sort of like areas in which they're cutting. I mean, they're cutting in a bunch of other places. That's only, I've just enumerated about $1.1 trillion in cuts, and they're supposedly getting another $900 billion in cuts out of the budget. Unclear right now where those are going to come from. And the whole thing is that the problem the Republicans have is they desperately want at least $4.5 trillion, this is over a course of 10 years, of tax cuts. In fact, $4.5 trillion in tax cuts, according to the people who have sort of done the back of the envelope stuff via David Dayen, is probably even too low a number because they want to extend the Trump tax cuts, make those permanent for corporations and rich people, with a tiny sliver of the tax cuts going to low-income people, middle-income people.
That they'll immediately pay to their landlord.
The tax cuts, understand, the Trump tax cuts for the people in the top 10 percentile, maybe it's even the top 5 percentile, was 3 times higher as a percentage than for low income. So obviously, yes, if you get a tax cut and you're a millionaire, you're going to be paying more. You're going to be getting a lot more, more money than if someone gets that same amount of tax cut and they only make $40,000 a year. But as a percentage too, it was 3 times higher. 60% of the value of the tax cuts went to the top 5%. And he wants to add to that, both on the wealthy and corporate side, and then do stuff like supposedly not tipping overtime. Now, he wants to close, he said, the carried interest loophole, which is when hedge fund guys, they don't get taxed at like a income rate. They get taxed at a capital gains rate, even though it's not their money. They manage other people's money. And for whatever reason, because of this loophole, they get taxed at the same rate as the people who make money that they make money for in capital gains. But for them, it's not their capital gains. It's just their work. So what's going to happen is he's going to close that loophole. And then he's going to say, actually, if you're a hedge funder, it's like a tip. You get a certain percentage of what you make for your clients, and it's tax-free because it's a tip. 15% for your meal. I always do 20% a former waiter, sometimes 25%. And so you get it's tax-free. That's the plan. So that is the budget resolution. But understand, ultimately, this has to be reconciled with whatever is happening in the Senate. And don't confuse that word reconcile with this being ultimately a reconciliation bill. Reconciliation bill just means that it doesn't need more than 50% plus one in both houses. And they'll get 2 bites at the apple if they want on the reconciliation. The Senate wants to split it up. Tax cuts in one thing, expenditures on the border and for defense in the other thing. They want to separate those 2 things because they know if they tie them together, they're going to run into problems with the people who pretend like they care about the deficit and the debt. Because it's going to obviously increase our deficit and debt by trillions of dollars, which they have to both pretend to care about, but don't really care about. So they're going to have problems with this. And this is going to be like literally a year-long process, maybe going into the fall and maybe, I don't know what the deadline is for reconciliation, but at the very least, it's going to happen over the next 6 or 7 months. In the meantime, we're 13 days away now, 16 days away from a government shutdown. And they're going to try and pass a continuing resolution of the existing budget we have. They don't have time to come up with a new budget. They just agreed on these broad strokes yesterday. And the real question is, are Democrats going to help them with this continuing resolution? And the answer should be a 100% unequivocal no until Trump agrees that he does not have the right to exercise what we call impoundment or a line item veto. If Congress appropriates the money, the president is bound and the agencies are bound to expend that money. And so that's what we're going to see over the next 13 days. We're turning away from what happened with that budget resolution and now going to look towards the continuing resolution for the numbers that we have now. And one other note, that budget contained a $20 billion cut to IRS. And it was a future cut, right? Because remember, there was $80 billion given to the IRS over the course of 10 years. $20 billion was cut in that first, was pulled back in the last Biden negotiations. But it's in the budget. So it would be cut again. And they've already cut a bunch of IRS people. And remember, whenever they cut the IRS, the first thing that happens, every dollar that is cut reduces audits of wealthy people because that's the most expensive place. So hopefully the Democrats will hold strong and like they did yesterday and not help with the continuing resolution and get out there and start messaging the Republicans are about to shut down the government. The Republicans are about to shut down the government. The Republicans are about to shut down the government because they refuse to agree to our constitutional order. We'll see. In the meantime, they're trying to pretend like they're not cutting Medicaid because they realize, like, hey, this is a problem. 70 million Americans. Some of those live in red states. In fact, a whole lot of them do. Here is a North Carolina Republican Addison McDowell, saying we're going to find a fraud and abuse. We're not going to actually do any cutting.
Of cuts on the Republican side is the $2 trillion cut. Some Congress people have concerns that it could ensnare Medicaid. Congressman Don Bacon, for example, saying he wants to advance Trump's agenda on national security, energy, and taxes, but doesn't want to make significant cuts to Medicaid. It's not explicitly laid out in this blueprint, but it could be affected. Are you confident?
Pause it. Let me just make this clear again. It's not explicitly laid out in this blueprint, but, you know, I have a cup of liquid IV here. And if you tell me to empty out 3/4 of that cup, well, let's say I had an eighth of coffee and the rest of it is liquid IV, and you tell me to empty out 3/4 of this cup, guess what? A bunch of it's going to be the liquid IV. No. So this isn't laid out specifically, but you cannot get $880 billion from that committee's portfolio without cutting hundreds of billions of dollars from Medicaid. It's impossible.
Or like the Egg Committee is going to be SNAP.
Yeah, 100%.
Explicitly laid out in this blueprint, but it could be affected. Are you confident that this blueprint wouldn't lead to any cuts in Medicaid?
I'm confident that there's waste, fraud, and abuse in our government and every system that we have. And that's what we're looking to find.
Does that include
I think
Medicaid?
There's not a single... If there is waste, fraud, and abuse in any program, we need to find it.
So that includes, just to be clear, sorry, a little bit of a delay, but to be clear, if there's waste, fraud, and abuse as you've described it in Medicaid, that would be something you would be supportive of looking at?
Absolutely. If there's waste, fraud, and abuse in anything, I can't imagine there's a single American that wouldn't want us to go and find that.
Okay, go find the waste, fraud, and abuse. But how are you going to do that? Are you going to sit in your office in Congress and go, we're going to call up every single and we're going to check through this? No, what you do is you hire more investigators at the DOJ or at CMS, HHS investigators to go look for more fraud and abuse. That fraud and abuse, incidentally, like we talked about yesterday, comes from providers. They have done extensive research on this, and they have done extensive, actually, prosecutions of people who have committed fraud, Medicaid fraud. And it's not people who are going around pretending that they're on Medicaid and they shouldn't be. It is people who are defrauding Medicaid by charging them for stuff that they haven't done. Medical device providers, ambulance companies, nursing homes, you name it. Providers, not beneficiaries. Here is AOC at that very same committee, House Energy and Commerce Committee hearing. This was from earlier that day, yesterday, I should say, outlining that they're full of it.
But that's the argument, right? But if that were true, then one would think that the so-called cost savings from certain wasteful cuts would be reinvested in Medicaid. However, that is not what the committee is proposing. They are proposing that we have cuts to these essential programs in order to pay for Elon Musk's tax breaks. The order has come down to this committee. Find $880 billion. Find it for what? To pay for a tax cut bill that benefits tax cuts on yachts and private jets and billionaires and mega corporations, while secretaries and working class people pay higher effective tax rates than Facebook does. Undocumented immigrants in this country pay more in taxes than many large corporations do. And so the argument here that these cuts need to be for the sustainability of Medicaid doesn't really make sense when you realize that these cuts are being just moved to justify expenditures and deficit spending in another area.
Yeah, if you thought there was waste, fraud, and abuse, and the only way to save Medicaid was to cut that waste, fraud, and abuse, and there was a magic button where you could be like, oh, we're just going to, these people at Medicaid, put in a line item, waste, and one's fraud, and one's abuse. We're just going to cut those. Then you would reinvest it into the program, into non-waste, fraud, and abuse. But again, their whole argument is, well, if there's 10% fraud in Medicaid, the way that we deal with that is by cutting Medicaid by 10%. It's absurd. If you have 10% of your inventory in your store is being shoplifted, the solution is not to cut down your inventory by 10 or 20%.
Yeah. If there's occasional immigrant crime, it doesn't mean you do mass deportations.
That's what we're looking at. And we'll see how far Democrats go in terms of being able to exploit this for political purposes. Hopefully, we're going to see ads running in Republican districts, purple districts tomorrow. In a moment, we'll be talking to Chris Geidner, proprietor of the Law Dork newsletter on Substack, about what's happening on the legal front and also what they're doing to Social Security. Because they'll come for that after Medicaid. First, a couple of words from our sponsors. This show is sponsored by Liquid IV. Every day, I am drinking, I try and drink 2 of these during the show. Today, I forgot to do my second one, sitting over there, the empty bottle. What does Liquid IV do? I mean, it's a habit for me. It's a ritual, but it's really actually just something I feel by the end of the day. I feel the difference. What does Liquid IV do? It gives you extraordinary hydration. It's powered by LIV Hydroscience. Liquid IV helps you break the mold. It has flavors like their new hydration multiplier, sugar-free raspberry lemonade, which I am enjoying right this moment. Not to be confused with the raspberry melon, which I also enjoy, sugar-free. They have sugar-free, what do we got over there? Lemon lime, which is also awesome. I think there's a white grape. They're delicious, and they're easy to carry with you. They come in small packets. You travel with them. 1 stick of Liquid IV will provide you 3 times the hydration of water alone. They got all sorts of flavors on their website. Sugar-free and not, acai berry, lemon lime, pina colada, which is one of my favorites. Like I say, they have sugar-free, white peach. That's what it is. And rainbow sherbet. I have not tried the rainbow sherbet. 1 stick, 16 ounces of water, hydrates you better than water alone. It has a optimized ratio of electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients that turn ordinary water into extraordinary hydration. 8 essential vitamins and nutrients, 3 times the electrolytes of leading sports drinks, always non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free. Embrace your ritual with extraordinary hydration from Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code MajorityRep. Not Majority Report, but Majority Rep at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code Majority Rep at liquidiv.com. Also sponsoring the program today. Oh, I got a new cat. But it's a kitten. So I can't feed it. I got to feed him kitten food right now. But if your cat's having digestive issues, if they're throwing up their food, or maybe your cat's just in the need of a diet upgrade, we have all been there. You should check out our next sponsor, Smalls. This podcast is sponsored by Smalls. To get 50% off your first order plus free shipping, head to smalls.com. Use our promo code MAJORITY. Smalls cat food is protein-packed recipes made with preservative-free ingredients you find in your fridge, and it's delivered right to your door. That's why Cats.com named Smalls their best overall cat food. The cat who I had, the most recent one who passed away, had like a week of Smalls, but he was not in great shape. So Matt's cat ended up
both of my cats
benefiting. What was their report on Smalls?
I think they were shocked to get food that was kept in a refrigerator. Like the pâtés are there. They gobble them up immediately. I have kind of picky cats, but they especially liked the sort of broth that you can squirt on the dry food, which is, again, like Smalls spoiled my cats, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
If you don't believe Matt, New York Magazine calls Smalls the best cat food according to veterinarians. Matt is not a veterinarian.
No.
BuzzFeed said my cats went completely ballistic for this stuff. Smalls also has a bunch of amazing treats and snacks you can add to your order. And after switching to Smalls, 88% of cat owners reported overall health improvements. Of course, that's a big deal. Do you have a particularly picky cat? Smalls has a sampler, so your cat can try everything Smalls has to offer. And the team at Smalls is so confident your cat's going to love their product that you can try it risk-free. That means they're going to refund you if your cat won't eat their food. What are you waiting for? Give your cat the food they deserve. Head to smalls.com. Use the promo code majority at checkout. 50% off your first order plus free shipping. That's the best offer you'll have. But you have to use our code majority. That's 50% off your first order. One last time. Promo code majority for 50% off your first order plus free shipping at smalls.com. We'll put all of that in the podcast and YouTube description. Now a quick break, and we'll be right back with Chris Geidner, proprietor of the Law Dork newsletter on Substack. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma Vigeland out today. Joining us now, Chris Geidner, proprietor of the Law Dork newsletter on Substack. Chris, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Sam.
So it is, there's so much going on. And there are my understanding is there's something like 80 active cases now that are not all focused on what DOGE is doing, but certainly focused on DOGE and the slew of executive orders that Trump has issued. And we should say that a lot of times these executive orders aren't really anything other than sort of like letters of intent.
There's
go ahead, explain that to us.
Yeah, there's sort of three types of executive orders. There's like actual executive orders that, like, if you would read about it in a book, what you would be talking about, that it's directing something, it's something that is within the president's authority and he's doing it. And then there's other executive orders that in the past probably would have just been labeled like presidential memoranda that says, like, I'm directing the Secretary of Education to look into X. And then there's a third one, which is, I think, what you were getting about, which is more like, it's just sort of like Donald Trump's thoughts, or more likely Stephen Miller's thoughts, something like that.
But even in that third instance, it's, if I was to sit here and go like, man, I like being in a room full of fans. When, I like the air circulating. somebody working here might go, oh, well, I'm going to turn on a fan because I know Sam likes it. I mean, some of the agencies do that, right?
Oh no, I mean, the problem, and this is what we've seen in a lot of the litigation, is like in some instances, what they're doing is so slipshod that it both makes a lawsuit easier and makes proving the things that you normally need to do in a lawsuit more difficult.
Because it's so vague, it's it's like you're arguing with air in some level. And I should also add,
I mean, sometimes that's ultimately good, as we saw like last Friday in the challenge to his anti-diversity, anti-DEI order, when the Judge Abelson enjoined provisions of those executive orders, a Maryland federal judge. I mean, one of the bases that he used for enjoining it was the fact that it's unconstitutionally vague, that it in effect was not telling all of these employers, nonprofits, outside companies, what it was that the order was even telling them they needed to do in order to comply with it.
All right. And let me just also say, just for clarity's sake, there's never been an instance where I have suggested that there's something I like in The Office and anybody reacted to it. I just want to make that clear. Okay. So broadly speaking, we have 80 cases or so that are ongoing. Who are the plaintiffs here? Like in broad categories, and how much is that, are we seeing for the first time, like sort of like planning that has been going on the legal front? You know, we're not talking about like the political front, because I'm quite convinced that there wasn't a lot of planning going on the political front. But on the legal front, it really feels like the people for 3 or 4 months, groups, maybe longer than that, had been sort of like gearing up. This is how we're going to deploy in these instances. Give me a sense of who the broad categories of these people are, and how much of that planning has actually been going on.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's two, not to fight the premise of your question, but like in addition to plaintiffs, it's really important to look at the legal groups behind them. In some cases, it's more important who the lawyers are at the bottom of the filing than who the plaintiffs are at the top, in terms of understanding where it came from. Now, I think you're right in terms of like
groups go out and find plaintiffs to carry this out. And
so, I mean, what we have, I mean, they're really right now in this first little more than a month that felt like a year of Trump 2.0. What we have is sort of 4 main areas of litigation. We have funding litigation, that are these various funding freezes. We have removal litigation. We have constitutional litigation. And then we have sort of the grab bag of other lawsuits, primarily against DOGE, that have existed. And so what you have within that is different groups of plaintiffs. Most effective, I mean, obviously in the removal cases, the plaintiffs are the people who were removed. We have the one case that went up on the shadow docket briefly to the Supreme Court was the Hampton Dellinger, who is the U.S. Office of Special Counsel, not to be confused with Special Counsel Jack Smith and the other ones. But
this is not the DOJ one. This is like to protect whistleblowers in the U.S. government.
The whistleblower agency. Yeah, this is, I mean, sort of the ideal agency that Donald Trump would not like. So it's not surprising he is trying to fire the guy in charge of that. Within the removal, so that's limited who the plaintiffs are going to be. They're going to be the removed
head of one of the EEOC commissioners, one of the National Labor Relations Board commissioners. I mean, right.
there have also been like just more random employees who have been suing, saying that they've been improperly fired.
Now,
but those are all going to be plaintiffs.
Now, yes, no, but the lawyers representing them and the groups that I mean, and I guess that's what I was, getting at. The groups behind it, have there been guys, people, broadly speaking, groups that have been gearing up? Like, he's going to come in. We know what Project 2025 is about. We know what Schedule F is. We don't know exactly who the plaintiffs are going to be, but we know the nature of the arguments we're going to be making, and we know which jurisdiction we want to bring this in. And that's what I want to get to in a moment. But give me a sense of those groups.
True. Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, national security counselors have been sort of focused on some of the I mean, it's in the name, some of the more national security related issues with both on the firing front and the DOGE front. There have also been just more experienced employment lawyers. I mean, obviously the federal government employment is a huge area of law, and so they're doing that. Then we've got the funding cases, and Democracy Forward has been very prominent in those cases. There have also been
who's Democracy Forward?
Democracy Forward is sort of out of Trump 1.0 organization that Sky Perryman is running, and they've brought I believe like nearly 24 cases already.
Were they gearing up for this? Like,
they were ready on day one to be paying attention to some of, keep in mind, you've got like the things that Trump did in his first term. You knew he was going to be trying some of them again. You had the very prominent things that he kept talking about on the campaign trail. Right. And then you had Project 2025. And so you did have sort of three broad areas of plans that you could be looking at to be preparing. And sort of as he did these different things, some of these cases were filed, and you've gotten some injunctions already. You've gotten TROs. Some of the actions when either DOGE went into an agency or a new acting director was put in that was affiliated with or seen as very sympathetic to DOGE. One of the key areas has been CFPB. When they sort of took over CFPB, that's obviously been something that Republicans writ large and the Trump administration have been trying to dismantle in various ways since it was put into effect. And the Democracy Forward brought litigation that's ongoing. I believe there was a hearing today in Maryland over their preliminary injunction request in that case. But, and this I think is really important, is that because of all of the litigation, something that we are seeing is that DOJ and agencies are in some cases willing to reach temporary agreements that they say, like, we won't take action while this case is pending, because they're just literally
stretched out too thin.
They're stretched too thin. And
I mean, that's what I have to say. Like, I've been very impressed about is that you're watching the response from the legal sort of, broadly speaking, the legal response has been so comprehensive in many ways that it feels like it's overwhelming. from our perspective, and in a political sense, and certainly in a news sense, it feels like the administration is overwhelming us. Like, they're flooding the zone. But from a legal sense, it feels like the plaintiff class, broadly speaking, and all the sort of groups that are bringing it back, have met that flood, have pushed back, and we're ready for it in such a way that now the flooding, to the extent that it's happening, at least in the legal front, is going the other direction. Like DOJ, because these guys are not. The one thing I will say about it is, like, they're going in to wreck government, and you don't need a lot of expertise to do that until you have to justify it in a court of law. And then all of a sudden you need to know what you're doing. And there's just not that many of them.
Yeah, you need very specific expertise, because you're going to be, especially, I mean, like, we are seeing in some senses sort of I would argue, a slightly more lawful reversal of what we saw in the Biden administration. Like, everybody's not just going to 2 judges in single district divisions like we saw, but we are seeing, like, everybody's learning about new courthouses. Everybody's learning about the District of Massachusetts. Everybody's learning about the District of Maryland. And because those go to the First Circuit on appeal, they go to the Fourth Circuit on appeal. So it's...
All right, let me slow you down here, because this was my next question, and I'm not sure people fully understand this. So during the Biden administration, what conservatives were doing to stop Biden policies, they were going to the Fifth Circuit, which is Texas, Louisiana, and maybe Oklahoma, is it? And Mississippi. Because the judges there, because of the nature of the way that federal judges get nominated, all very Trumpy, very conservative. And there were specific districts within that circuit where there's only 2 or 3 judges, and one of them is that guy Kaczynski or whatever. Kaczmarek. I want to say Ted Kaczynski, but pretty close. But they kept going to him, and he had the ability to basically freeze across the country. Whatever it was.
There are 2. So in like districts, the Northern District of Texas, which has something like 20 judges, there are divisions, and there are 2 divisions that if you file a case in that division, it has a 100% chance of being assigned in the one single judge division to Matt Kaczmarek, and in the other one to Reed O'Connor.
So this is known as
using that
venue shopping, and the federal judiciary attempted to reform the rules on venue shopping, and they got so much pushback, I guess, from I don't know who.
From the Northern District of Texas.
From the Northern District of Texas.
And McConnell and Trump.
So they stopped doing that, and now it's flipped. Now the plaintiffs, the people who are being represented, the judges, the lawyers, they're going and they're doing their own venue shopping in Massachusetts. And how are they deciding that?
They're doing it in a way that we've always seen. Like, they're not going to a single judge. They're just saying, like, the District of Maryland will take us to the Fourth Circuit. And the Fourth Circuit is lopsided Democratic appointees, and we want to bring our appeals there. The First Circuit, that's New England, that has currently all Democratic appointees. And so when they bring it to the District of Massachusetts, they might get a Republican appointee, but they know that on appeal, it will go to the First Circuit, where they think that they'll have a better shot. And so
where is our Kaczmarek?
In some ways, I would argue we don't have a Kaczmarek, because our judges follow the law. Like, we have some, our version of a Kaczmarek or Reed O'Connor is a really smart judge who we think we're right on the law, and we think we're going to get a really good ruling. I think a good example is some of the cases that we've had this week. Judge Amir Ali was one of the last judges confirmed in the Biden administration. He's sitting in the DC District Court. He had been run the MacArthur Justice Center before he was a federal judge. He's very smart. He's was a progressive advocate lawyer, and he's now a lifetime tenure judge on the DC District Court. And so, yeah, I think that liberals were happy when the USAID State Department funding case got to him. But his rulings have been detailed, have been smart, have been designed to be able to be upheld on appeal, which I think is the difference between sometimes I think Matt Kaczmarek is issuing a decision knowing that even the Fifth Circuit, as conservative as it is going to overturn some of it, and he's just trying to get 50% of it through.
And giving somebody an opportunity to audition for the Supreme Court for Donald Trump. Let me just go back to one thing here as you talk about this, because maybe this is now, 15, 20 years ago, but Harry Reid sort of nuked the filibuster when it came time to fill the DC Circuit Court. And, we've heard people say in the past, like, he should have never done that. That's why the Republicans were able to, get rid of the filibuster for the Supreme Court. I'm quite convinced they would have done that anyways. We watched Mitch McConnell refuse to even have a hearing 9 months out for Merrick Garland. Not necessarily my favorite pick in that instance anyways, but then basically bring a judge in within 3 weeks before an election in another instance. But that DC Circuit still remains like, I think with maybe a 6-judge majority in the full en banc Democratic appointed. It could be more than that. I can't remember off the top of my head. But in moments like this, that is huge, isn't it? Because many of those cases, and that happened 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is impossible to understate the importance of the judges that Biden was able to get through. The reality is that if we still had a filibuster, yes, some of the Trump appointees wouldn't have gotten through. But I think you're right that Mitch McConnell, as soon as he needed to, would have gotten rid of it at any level. I think that the end result is that we were able to get really excellent judges through who would not have been able to get through in a past era. I think the importance of professional diversity. Biden was the first president who really focused on getting
defense attorneys, civil rights attorneys,
ideal civil rights lawyer. Like in the past, there used to be like you'd have 1 or 2 appeals court judges who were public defenders. Whereas Biden had dozens.
Yep.
And I think we will see that. Honestly, I think will be one of the longest lasting legacies of the Biden administration is how differently in a decade the courts are going to be looking at these issues, because we just have judges who actually fought the government. And that was just not the case, because even Democrats were appointing former prosecutors
and just all corporate attorneys. And we should also say the level of aggressiveness that the Biden administration did in filling these judges means there's a lot less for Trump to low hanging fruit for him to fill.
Unlike the
Obama administration. Yes.
Which, I mean, that was not all their fault. The Republicans had the majority in the Senate. But the fact is,
it was mostly his fault. was mostly this vote.
Yeah. I mean, but at the end of the day, like, you ended up with very, very few appeals court vacancies. I think there were like maybe 2 or 3, which is just an incredible job. Like, it was so important because, I mean, I'm knocking on wood because it'll probably change the second after I say this, but like, we are yet to see any Trump nominees for courts. And part of that, I think, to go back to our larger discussion, is because they've been too busy putting out these amorphous executive orders and then needing to go to court and defend them. And the one group we didn't get into, and I know we're running out of time, I just want to make sure I don't leave them out, is that the civil rights groups have been bringing those constitutional challenges. We didn't get into that, but like NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Lambda Legal, ACLU, like, when it comes to the constitutional challenges, National Center for Lesbian Rights, these anti-trans orders, the anti-DEI, diversity, resegregation orders, those traditional civil rights organizations are on it and are bringing their lawsuits as well, and they've succeeded in getting either temporary restraining orders, preliminary injunctions, or the other thing we talked about, where like they'll just DOJ will talk with their client and get them to agree to take no action while litigation is ongoing.
And just yesterday, I think it was yesterday, or maybe it was the day before. No, this was Tuesday. Just yesterday. Like you mentioned, you had Lauren Ali Khan, preliminary injunction that blocks the administration from freezing federal grants and loans. That was an expansion of an earlier block. Before that, Amir Ali, who you mentioned, ordered the Trump administration to pay foreign aid-related money to government contractors and nonprofit groups by Wednesday night. That's amid the legal fight over freezing of U.S. aid and State Department funds. In that instance, Greg Sargent had a very sort of like just a disturbing story in, I think it was the New Republic, and I'll mention it later in the program, but broadly speaking, there are 2 companies in this country that create basically an emergency type of food for children who are literally wasting away. These are this is for foreign aid. Children who are so malnourished that they cannot eat regular food because they don't have the capacity to digest it. And it is this like, it's like pre-digested, almost like baby food, but high in protein, made from American-made peanuts, American, all this, American manufactured. The packages say, brought to you by the American public. There's only 2 companies that do it. They're sitting on enough food to feed like 400,000 children like this, but they don't know who to talk to at USAID. There's nobody to like fulfill the contracts. There's nowhere to go. Does this order like release that money? Do you know? Or and just to add the third one, in Washington State, a federal judge issued an order about halting the suspension of refugee admissions and funding. Do we know, like, are they listening to the courts?
Yeah, I mean, this is a difficult, nuanced area, and there's sort of 3 answers. The first is, in some cases they are. In some instances, the order is unambiguous. The agency is able to do it. DOJ tells them, and they do it. In some instances, the order, I mean, you understand, like, I mean, if you put 2 lawyers in a room and show them a contract and tell them to fight about it, they'll find a way to fight about it. And so you have a little bit of that with these TROs and injunctions that, like, it's not surprising that the agency and DOJ are trying to interpret it as narrowly as possible. But then you do have some
now when they do that, when it's narrowly as possible, and I certainly understand the dynamic with lawyers having been raised by one.
Sorry.
Do the plaintiff attorneys at that time, they go, okay, you guys aren't doing this. We're going back to the court.
Yeah. And that is what has happened in the USAID case. There are two things that can happen. Either the plaintiffs decide that it's not happening, that they feel like it's not being followed, and they go to court, file a motion to enforce the TRO or injunction, or what has happened, and I think is a good sign that it's both a sign of sort of aggressive pushback from DOJ, but it's also a sign that it is an acknowledgement of the authority of the court. What they'll do is they'll file a notice of compliance that is that they'll have language that's like, here is how we interpret your order. Tell us if we're wrong. And it might be an aggressive, like you and I might look at it and say like, that's ridiculous. There's no way that the judge's order excluded that, but they're doing it. They're going to court. They're basically putting themselves.
They're de facto conceding that there is authority over them that they feel like they have to justify to.
Exactly. And that's where we're at with Ali right now and this USAID funding, that like his initial TRO was February 13th. He issued an order to enforce it that was more generic on February 20th. And then yesterday he issued the order saying, okay, yes, as to the first order, the second order, and now I'm setting a deadline of 11:59 on the 26th.
Okay, so he's now, okay, let me ask you this, and TRO just for people, temporary restraining order. And so he's doing, it's like I'm saying like, hey, to my kid, like, hey, you're done with your iPad right now. You've watched enough screen time. I come back in 2 minutes later, and you're still on it. What are you doing? Put the iPad down. And I come back 2 minutes later and I go, okay, you got to count to 10. And if you don't, you lose it for the whole week. That's where we are in that. But is there a way for plaintiffs to go in and go like, hey, instead of let's tell the kid 3 times, how about let's start with, you got 3 seconds to put that iPad down. And otherwise we're going to, because
here's the problem, you might lose.
All right. So that's what I was trying to get to.
I mean,
strategically, is there a fear that if we push too hard, we're going to create a precedent where all of a sudden the administration feels like it's off to the races? Now we don't have to listen to anything.
Some of the standards for this preliminary relief, these are technically all emergency relief. And in order to do that, in addition to needing to show that you are likely to succeed in your case, you also need to be able to show what's called irreparable harm. And that's where you get into this issue. And that's where, when you've seen some losses, particularly relating to DOGE aspects, is that the judges are saying you haven't shown irreparable harm. And for some of these funding issues, for some of these removal issues, trying to get a judge to put a direct time limit of like 2 days from now, 24 hours from now, 48 hours from now, what the judge might say is, you can't prove irreparable harm in that time, so I'm denying it. You might be able to prove irreparable harm if
indefinitely
USAID just doesn't fund it, but you can't prove irreparable harm by when.
If it's not done within a week. I see. So they don't get that aggressive, because if they make it that narrowly tailored, they have a better chance of losing the temporary restraining order or whatever it is they're looking for.
I think what we're seeing is in some ways better, because not only is it's the judge getting mad and not the plaintiff getting mad, but it is also setting up, and this is part of the reasoning. Judges, district court judges generally, Kaczmarek notwithstanding, don't want to be reversed on appeal. And part of this is judges being careful to make sure that they are establishing a crystal clear, solid record before they take extreme actions. Like if we do ever get to a point of a federal judge trying to hold a federal executive branch official in contempt, you want to make sure that the judge is able and the plaintiffs on appeal are able to point to, there is no question that this was intentional non-adherence of a judge's order. We've got 3 weeks of briefing before this judge issued a contempt order. And I think that's what we're seeing is methodical steps being taken to ensure that compliance is clear on the legal front and on the timing front.
All right. So lastly, are you surprised at all by the administration's responses across the board? Like, in other words, their willingness, the compliance thing, the willingness to sort of like not contest. It does not feel, outside of like Musk and Vance at one point, I don't know when this was, like 2 weeks ago maybe, when Vance was like, these judges have no business doing this. Outside of that one moment, did you anticipate a more sort of like legalistic attempt or arguments to be deployed that like, no, this is like, it doesn't feel like there's an attempt to, whereas 2 or 3 weeks ago, it felt like there was going to be an attempt to bring an Impoundment Control Act case to the Supreme Court. It doesn't feel like that anymore. What's your sense?
I think there's two things. I think like on the end front, they still have faith that they've got the Supreme Court in their pocket. And so and when it comes to Trump or Musk lashing out, I bet that there are people behind them behind closed doors being like, if nothing else, calming them down, preventing them from lashing out publicly by saying like, don't worry, these are district court judges. We've at the end of the day, we're going to win. So I do think if we get to the point when like the Supreme Court pushes them down, we're going to have a more make or break moment. The other side of it is that by and large, and this is when we were talking about sort of the steps that Judge Ali is taking, the district court judges have been very careful. They haven't been doing what Kaczmarek does and issuing these overbroad injunctions. When you look at like the order about the DEI funding last Friday, like the judge did such a good job of laying out, I am only going at these 3 provisions in these 2 executive orders. This is all that I'm doing. Here's my legal reasoning under vagueness. Here's my legal reasoning under the First Amendment. And that's why I'm doing that for these 3 discrete provisions of these 2 orders. And what that does is it makes it really hard for Musk, Vance, Trump, Josh Hawley, Tom Cotton to start lashing out on social media, because how do you do that when like it's so narrow, so methodical? And so I do think that the judges by and large see what they're up against, and with the exception of like the birthright citizenship order, which luckily thus far we're unanimous across the board, in keeping all of that on hold nationwide. The judges are realizing that like they are operating in a moment where they need to be prepared for the administration at any moment to go to the Supreme Court and say, fix this.
Okay, I lied. I had one more question to ask you, and because this one's about Social Security, and I'm very concerned.
Yeah.
They keep saying they're not going to touch Social Security. They have fired people at I think 10 different Social Security Administration offices. And you just wrote a piece yesterday.
Yeah, I think it published before midnight.
The entire Office of Civil Rights and Equal Opportunity at Social Security Administration was eliminated. First off, I know these guys were obviously a lot of DEI and whatever. No, what does the Office of Civil Rights and Equal Opportunity at Social Security Administration do? And by how many decades did it even predate the concept of DEI?
Yeah, it is the office where responsible for discrimination complaints, for harassment complaints, for accommodations, disability-related accommodations. This is the internal office that across the nation deals with that, deals with all of those basic protections of the employees across the Social Security Administration. This wasn't brown bag lunches. This wasn't this was very real harm happening to employees. And this was the office in charge of protecting it. The one thing that I talk about in my article was an employee who, as of Monday, had been a director at that within the office, basically saying that the office had been eliminated, and please wait for instructions from the agency to request EEO counseling, which is how you start a discrimination complaint, report harassment, or guidance for reasonable accommodations. In other
words, if I'm working at a Social Security Administration office in in central Massachusetts, and the ramp into the office broke, and my boss there says, "Nah, I'm not going to replace that. We don't need to do that anymore. You got to figure out a way of getting up those stairs." This is the office that I would contact.
Yeah.
As an employee and say, "Hey, I can't get into my office. I have to go around and I can't get into my office now." And this is the office that would deal with that complaint. Or if I've got a boss who's going, "Hey, sweet legs," and I go, "Hey, you're not supposed to be doing that." And this is the office.
That's the office, and the Baltimore Banner got somebody from the Social Security Administration, a spokesperson, to acknowledge that it was 140 employees who were placed on administrative leave immediately within that office. One of the questions that I raised is that the office had several centers within it that it was responsible for. It's not clear if they were a part of these administrative leave. And the problem is that while the acting administrator, the acting commissioner of the Social Security Administration, who himself took office after all sorts of DOGE-related confusion last weekend, if you didn't remember, the Washington Post reported on this, and Marissa Kabas at the Handbasket has also done some follow-up on it, where this guy Leland Dudek, who's now running the administration, he says that they're going to be moving around the statutory responsibilities, which I thought it was interesting. He admitted there are legal responsibilities that were the job of this office, and everybody who was responsible for carrying out those legal obligations was placed on administrative leave yesterday. And while Dudek says that they're going to reallocate responsibilities, he didn't say where they're going. And so, yeah, if something happens this morning to you, it's not clear that the Social Security Administration has anything in place to actually deal with that.
Is is he allowed to do that? I mean, how statutorily, like when we have a statute, presumably passed by Congress, that's the way that it's been working in this country for really several hundred years in terms of like statutes. When the statute is passed and says, hey, there needs to be a division in Social Security that addresses discriminatory actions and whatnot, like, does he have the ability to sort of change that?
What could happen is that he could issue a memo saying that all of the statutory, I mean, it could be a one sentence memo, all of the statutory obligations of the Office of Civil Rights and Equal Opportunity will forthwith be the responsibility of the Office of Communications.
Okay, I see.
And he could do that. I mean,
but for as long as there is no assignment for those, the statute is not being followed.
I would argue that an agency employee would have standing to bring a lawsuit saying that the agency is not
fulfilling
its statutory obligations.
Chris Geidner, proprietor of the Law Dork newsletter on Substack. Really appreciate your time today. There's so much going on, and it's really important that people have at least a clear perspective on at least the sort of the broad categories of what's happening, and you really helped us with that today. Thanks so much. And we'll, of course, put a link to the Law Dork newsletter on Substack.
Thanks.
All right, folks, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to go into the fun half. A truck nut says, hey, Sam, I work for a Social Security disability in Michigan. Hasn't hit the big news outlets yet, but the Michigan office that is being closed under DOGE is a mystery to us. There is no Okemos office. It was closed in the 70s. Well, what? So DOGE announced the closure of a Social Security office that was not open. Okay. You know, here's the thing. So much of this is there's massive incompetence. There's massive incompetence that is also fueled by, I think, copious amounts, at least at the top, of ketamine and probably cocaine. And also some, probably some neurological issues.
And just the general selected for psychopathy of executives.
And then just sort of like a general incompetence. And it's hard to know whether like they just want to make it seem like they can. If we start announcing that we can't, I mean, just look back on Elon Musk's career. We're going to be on Mars in 3 years. The
full self-driving in a few years.
Full self-driving. The Tesla pickup truck is going to be submergible in water. I'm going to build a Hyperloop. I mean, it just go back all like he'll say things, and sometimes they're deployed in such a way like with a purpose. Like he wanted to derail, no pun intended, the high-speed rail between San Francisco and LA, and he did that by, sort of like claiming that he was going to build some type of Hyperloop there, et cetera, et cetera. So it's hard to know. It's really, really hard to know what is the...
Well, it's like Trump. There's a lot of self-promotion that comes into being a capitalist in America. That's why Trump was calling in as John Miller to, tabloids in the 90s. Musk is constantly on Twitter protecting his image and even bought it for that reason.
Yep. Well, I mean, the guy paid somebody to play video games for him so he could pretend like he was that's what we're dealing with here. I was playing, Saul's got like a little basketball hoop in his room, and we play pig or horse before he goes to bed. And now it's awesome because if he steps too close after, like dude, I was standing there, not there. All I got to do is say, like, don't be like Elon Musk. And it's great. It's a shorthand. It's honestly like one of the most embarrassing things you can say to a kid now. Don't be like Elon Musk or Donald Trump. This should be of some comfort. One of the things about moving quick and breaking things is that sometimes you make mistakes. Now, let's say you have an app that, I don't know, let's say you have an app that delivers, liquor. I got a new delivery app. And you come in and you bust things up and you shake it around. Uh-oh, people don't get their liquor delivered on time. That's going to be a problem. The liquor delivery app is shut down for 12 hours. Don't worry about it, folks. And then there's things like what Elon Musk is talking about here.
And I should say, we will make mistakes. We won't be perfect. But when we make a mistake, we'll fix it very quickly. So, for example, with USAID, one of the things we accidentally canceled very briefly was Ebola, Ebola prevention. I think we all want Ebola prevention. So we restored the Ebola prevention immediately, and there was no interruption. But we do need to move quickly if we're to achieve a $1 trillion deficit reduction in financial year 2026. It requires saving $4 billion per day, every day, from now through the end of September. But we can do it, and we will do it.
Oh, he must be a genius. He worked it out on a per-day basis. Whoa. We accidentally cut Ebola, and we also accidentally fired everybody in charge of the nuclear arsenal. I mean, you could be in 6th grade and know, hey, don't cut the Ebola people. Don't cut the people in charge of the nuclear arsenal. But it might take a little bit more nuance to say, like, hey, maybe it is a problem if we cut the people in charge of, like, doing the Social Security payments. Or maybe it is a problem. Maybe it is a problem if we don't have people at USAID who are there to answer the phone when we're supposed to deliver 400,000 meal kits to starving children in Africa. Maybe that takes a little bit of nuance. And my point being that he can talk about, like, we fixed the Ebola thing very quickly. We fixed that very quickly. But they don't give a crap about half of the other things.
They're ready.
And the other half, they don't have a clue about.
They're ready to eat food.
Yep. They don't care. Folks, your support is what makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free show free of commercials, but you get the fun half. Then you get to IM us. Sometimes you get to wait on hold if you want to call the show for a long time. Also, don't forget Just Coffee. Oh, you can go to jointhemajorityreport.com to do that. Your support is what makes this possible, honestly. It's not bleeding here. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. If you are one of those people who can't afford the fun app, but you want access to it, send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Put into the subject line fun half. Give us a little time. We're slow. We got a lot of stuff coming at us these days, but we'll get there. ESVN on break. Still nursing the devastating loss Celtics handed to the Knicks. I understand it. Left reckoning.
Yeah, it's a shame Karl Anthony Towns isn't still on the Wolves, where he'd actually be with some winners. Elise Joshi and Van Jackson on last night. Elise is the was the Gen Z for Change leader who stood up and pressed Karine Jean-Pierre about the Biden administration's climate inaction and talking about what she's planning on doing under the Trump administration. Is very interesting to talk on youth activism. Also, Van Jackson, very smart analyst of foreign policy and international relations, talking about Trump's basically fake cuts to the Pentagon, which is like less to do with cutting the actual military budget, more to do with getting rid of black folks in the military, and also the Ukraine issue and some other stuff. So check that out, patreon.com/leftreckoning to get the fun half or post game.
See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us
this? Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them, just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100.
Can't knock the hustle.
Come on, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. Sam Seder, Fun Half, Majority Report. Emma out today, back tomorrow. Let's go to the IMs. Bexarani